Central Florida, just above the Everglades, and northwest of Big Lake Okeechobee, where the gators and the other miscellaneous badass critters live. No joke, folks. This is Far Out Radio. I'm Scott Teeters. Today is Monday. It is February the 16th, 2015. And no, that's not me on the slide guitar. I wish. Hope you had a good day and a nice weekend. Hope your thinking cap is close by, because we're going to give you plenty to consider and think about this evening from our guest, veteran journalist and deep thinker, John Rappoport. John is a journalist, an investigative reporter, author, political activist, and a teacher of reality. He's been on the inside of the mainstream media. He's written for the LA Weekly, Spin Magazine, Stern, Village Voice, Nexus, CBS Health Watch, and other newspapers and magazines across the U.S. and Europe. John even ran for Congress back in 1994, and I'm sure we could do several programs just on that topic, and maybe we will someday. And like Neo from the movie series The Matrix, John has broken free of the Matrix. One of the things that I enjoy about John's material is that he doesn't just report on bad stuff and leave you hanging. He points his readers in a direction of freedom of thought. And if you'd like to bust out of the Matrix sooner rather than later, John has 3 mega collections, and I do mean mega. There's a ton of material. There's 3 mega collections that can be your guide. They are titled The Matrix Revealed, Exit from the Matrix, and Power Outside the Matrix. Tonight we'll be doing a broad overview of John's Matrix material. Now, if you go to John's website, nomorefakenews.com, you sign up for his free newsletter, you'll be treated to some of the most astute, incisive, and clear essays that you'll ever have the pleasure of reading. But first, since we have a for-real mainstream media news journalist, a guy who knows what the inside of the Ministry of Truth is like, I'd like to get his thoughts and observations concerning the mainstream media's latest firestorm, the Brian Williams story. Since the story broke on February the 4th, John has delivered 4 posts on the topic. John, welcome back to our program.
To be here, thanks.
John, on Wednesday, February the 4th, the day the Williams story broke, Politico.com posted a story saying that MSNBC suffered its lowest ratings in a decade. And by the weekend, Brian said that he was pulling himself out of the anchor chair for a few days so things could cool down. I thought that was nice of him. And I guess he was hoping that everybody would forget by about the middle of the week, but then early in the week, NBC put him on ice for 6 months with no pay. Now, this has got to be like a 9.0 earthquake at NBC, because they were already in a very distant third place behind CNN, which was already in a very distant second place. Well, I wasn't able to find any hard numbers, but what we have been hearing consistently over the past few years is that the overall ratings of network news is tanking. So my first question I'd like to ask you, since you have the insight of having been an insider, you know what it's like in there, are the wheels on this old jalopy about ready to fall off?
Well, I think they've been falling off for quite some time, but this certainly has accelerated the process, I would say. You know, Brian Williams, of all the mainstream network television anchors, news anchors, he most closely resembled the tradition, you know, going back to Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite, and coming up through Dan Rather before he fell on his sword. And by that I mean he had the confidence of the public, a large segment of the public. They believed in him. And, of course, being a television anchor, that's what it's all about, especially a national or global anchor. It's how good an actor are you?
Mm-hmm.
Can you present the news as if you really believe it? And you believe all of the, you know, absence of context, and you believe the superficiality of it. You believe that the conflicts that you're describing between different political parties and nations and so forth, that's, you know, all there is to it. That's That's what the world is. That's what reality is. And so I've seen this over the years with many mainstream reporters who start off, they believe. They believe and they believe and they believe. And then they realize that they're actors in a play. They no longer believe. At that point, it's all about their career. What can they do to inflate their numbers, to look good, look better, make themselves more appealing, convey the news in such a way that it becomes a form of mind control and hypnotic acceptance by the public, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Brian Williams was certainly on that path because, you know, he wanted to go on Jon Stewart, and he wanted to go on David Letterman, and he wanted to go on Saturday Night Live and other shows that had nothing to do with the news.
Yes.
Because he knew that this would increase his popularity. And there was also a lot of ego involved in it. I'm the actor. I can do a splendid job at many different venues. I can appeal to many different kinds of people. I can retain their trust. He wanted to prove that he could be bigger and bigger and bigger as an actor, like a star, you know, in the movies, in Hollywood. That was his prime motivation, regardless of what he said. That's where he was going. And so along the way, he told tall stories. He lied about his experiences in order to make himself out to be a bigger actor than he already was. And so he got caught doing it. In getting caught, you know, now he's in a real pickle because he doesn't want to give up that quest to be bigger and better as an actor and a bigger star. That's the last thing he wants to give up. That's why he's in the business. So what's he going to do?
I guess he's going to work on his stamp collection for the next 6 months or so. But, you know, you mentioned him going on to some of these entertainment-type programs. I forget which one it was, but I happened to see him on. And I wasn't a fan, and I wasn't a detractor. I was just sort of neutral about Brian Williams. I know who he is. Really didn't have an opinion about the fellow, but when I saw him on one of those television programs, what I saw was a very slick dude. And it just sort of, I noticed it and I thought, man, he's really coming off slick. Whereas when he does his news broadcast, he comes across very self-assuring and kind of, it's like looking right at you. He really had that thing that he had it, you know, that Uncle Walter kind of a quality to it. But that was not the guy I saw on, it may have been the Letterman show. I saw a very slick fellow. But it seems that the more that they dig around, now they're going to do an internal investigation, which, I don't know, I'd rather see an independent investigation of what he's been talking about. But, you know, we'll take what we can get. But my goodness, you know, the stories about puppies and dead floating bodies and SEAL Team 6 and meeting the Pope. I mean, this guy's turning into the Forrest Gump of news broadcasters.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. It's just the right time.
Just happened to be in the helicopter when it was fired on, just happened to be in the burning house with a puppy. You know, all of those kinds of things. Just happened to be in a hotel in New Orleans when a body floated by during Katrina. These are the stories of traveling salesmen.
Yeah.
When they sit around, they have a few drinks, and they begin to, you know, embroider and exaggerate, tell tall tales. Doesn't work with an anchor. But this is a problem that every mainstream news reporter of any fame faces. And that is that particular moment when he realizes that he's a professional liar. You know, because believe believe me, that moment comes when he realizes, this is not right. The way I'm presenting the news is not really the news. It's a stage play. It's artificial. It's a synthetic product. It's plasticized. It doesn't get down to the real issues. It doesn't name the real criminals. It omits the really vital stories of our time. It doesn't dig deep to find out who has the power and who's really wielding the power. He realizes some or all of these things, and yet he still has a career. So what's he going to do? And what most of them overwhelmingly decide to do is to improve their acting ability, just like a movie star does. When he realizes that he signed a contract to do 5 movies for a major studio, and all the scripts that he's getting are, duds, ridiculous, pathetic. They have no real artistic merit of any kind, but it's the career that has to be protected, so he's going to have to go along and do the very best job he can and pretend that this is really what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different, and it happens to many, many reporters. Some of them just become complete alcoholics, but it's a crossroad. And I think it's a crossroad, for many people who are not reporters, who are just not even necessarily independent researchers, but people who watch the news, who read, who investigate, who look into things. They come to a point where, is it going to be the truth, or am I going to just pretend that reality is what it seems to be?
Well, they were paying Brian $16 million a year, so I guess he felt he was doing all right. Oh, my. We shall see, won't we? Now, I tried to look for some comparative figures to see how far mainstream media news has slipped, and all I could find, on a quick search was just current demographic readings. It really wasn't giving me any kind of reading as to where they are now as opposed to where they were, say, 10 or 20 years ago. Is it indeed down, and down a lot?
Oh, yeah. They have definitely fallen. Fallen considerably because, of course, you had the explosion of cable news, but then the Internet really, has been wiping them out. They're losing numbers, they're losing share, and they're losing the public's confidence. There's no doubt about it. And they don't know what to do about it. That's the other thing. I mean, it occurred to me maybe 7 or 8 years ago when I was starting to cover a few medical stories that were so explosive in terms of, what would happen if the truth were widely broadcast. For example, the number of people in the United States that the medical system kills every year.
Right.
And I've written about this extensively, and it's based on multiple sources, studies in the mainstream. I'm not even talking about independent researchers who find that those numbers are even higher. And so I thought, well, suppose the New York Times decided that they were going to cover this medically caused death in America, and they were going to throw it on the front page the way the Washington Post threw Watergate on the front page.
Mm-hmm.
Going to pound on it day after day, week after week, month after month. Set the hounds loose, the reporters, and say to them, this is what you've been waiting for your whole career, to cover an incredibly explosive story and to keep on covering it. And new people will come out of the woodwork and confess their sins. Doctors, health, bureaucrats, they will confess as the pressure builds in the pressure cooker. And this will become, one of the biggest stories of your career, probably the biggest, if we keep pounding on it. And the sales of the newspaper will skyrocket. We can put out 2 or even 3 editions a day, print, as well as the website. We can put some of the information online, and the rest of it will be in print. And our profits and ad revenues will go through the roof. Yes, the pharmaceutical companies will desert us, but new people will come on board. And we'll make enormous amounts of money, get out of the red, and become known all over the world as fearless, courageous, we tell the truth, we don't back away. Because,
sounds like a plan to me.
by the most conservative estimate, U.S. medical system kills 225,000 Americans a year. That's 2.25 million deaths per decade. Now, people write about the effect of this, the effect of that, and this and that, and all kinds of esoteric things going on. But there you have, we're talking about genocidal figures there.
Yes.
So any major news outlet that wanted to resuscitate itself and be reborn again could do it. They could do it. And they know they could do it, but there's just one little problem. They're already sold out. They're already part of the problem. They're already aligned with all the interests that are killing 225,000 people a year, and not just through advertising. Politically, financially, in all manner of different ways, socially, conspiratorially. They're connected up to their hip. And so that's when I saw, okay, this is the death of mainstream journalism, because the only way out for them is to begin to tell the truth at a very deep and explosive level to get back their audience, because no matter how hypnotized the audience is, they will wake up and they will perceive the truth if it is hammered on day in and day out, and they will buy newspapers. But they can't do it. The Times can't do it. The Washington Post can't do it. The LA Times can't do it. The London Times can't. Nobody can do it of that ilk, because they already sold their soul. It's too late. They're already part of the establishment to such a degree that there is no way out for them. So they're doomed. How long it takes, I don't know, but they're on the way out.
Didn't this get on the fast track, John, in the late 90s when, or somewhere in the Clinton administration, when they allowed the mergers of these news outlets, and we went from having hundreds of independently owned news outlets down to about a half a dozen or so. And we all know what happens when things become a big corporation. It just takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, there's now 6 basic corporations that own media in this country. And so, yes, it just becomes, it's another profit-making or money-losing, whatever it is, business. That's all it is. Except it has to obey the rules of the conspiracy against you, me, and everybody else. It has to go along with it. It can't take up, the sword. For example, suppose in some miraculous way, the editorial board and the publisher of the New York Times realized that so-called climate science is completely empty and synthetic and artificial and faked and fraudulent from top to bottom. That there is absolutely no proof that man-made warming is a reality or is causing significant problems for the planet. So just suppose, they all came to that conclusion. And they looked at each other and they thought, wow, if we broke this story, not just once on the front page, but, we ran, let's say, 60 or 70 stories on this over the course of a year.
Mm-hmm.
Bam, 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 bam. And we just turned the whole thing around. And we got scientist after scientist to admit that they had been fraudulent. How many papers could we sell? But they wouldn't be able to do it.
Makes you believe. We have our music playing, John, so we're going to roll into our break, but it really makes you believe that there's another agenda there besides selling newspapers. It's always worth remembering those famous words of Howard Beale from the movie Network at the end of the film when he's making that wonderful speech and he says, "We're in the boredom-killing business."
Right.
He said a lot of great stuff. Wonderful film. For our listeners, if you've never seen the movie Network, watch it. It's wonderful. We're going to take our commercial break. John Rappaport's with us. We were talking about the media. When we get back, we're going to get into his Matrix program. Be right back. Radio. Thanks for being with us on a Monday night. Hope it's not too terribly cold where you are. The country is getting beaten up this winter, that's for sure. That's how global warming works, right, John? It's unbelievable. The movie series The Matrix came out in 1999, and I was thinking about this, John, before the program, because I want to talk about your Matrix series. When it came out in 1999, the country was enjoying almost full employment. The new millennium was about to, it was just around the corner. It seemed like happy days were here again. I had a corporate job, and I remember hearing talk about maybe it's time we move into a 4-day work week. So when this movie came out, it was just pure fantasy action. But as the years have rolled by, the last 15, 16 years now, this movie looks so prophetic. It's just amazing. When did it occur to you that we may well be living inside of a matrix?
Book 8 Inc. published. And I had spent, maybe a year. It's kind of a blur when I look back on it now, but it was my first real foray into deep investigation of the medical cartel, and there were so many things that I discovered. I mean, fraud at such profound level that challenged so much of consensus reality. And I discovered that medical mind control, or by which I mean informational mind control from the medical cartel, the propaganda really ran much deeper in human consciousness than political, military. This stuff was this was the church of medical science of the 20th and 21st century, and it was just astounding to me. And I saw, at that point, some really bad things ahead. Not just in medical terms, but I could see how deep programming could go. Societal programming, individual programming, and the consequent loss of freedom. So I would put my, date of recognition right there, 1988. And so the 90s for me, I kept waiting, and I said, yeah, it looks good, but I'm just not buying it. They're going to do something. And, of course, a number of things happened. But, it's all about constructing reality? Who is constructing it? How are they doing it? What does it look like? How do they program people from one end of the planet to the other? And that's where I was starting to get in my research as a reporter, and I realized it was taking me way beyond where I imagined I was going to go. But now that I was there, it was where I wanted to be, because so many things that had never made sense to me before and didn't add up, and on so many levels finally made sense. And so that was my date.
Give us a few examples, John, of some of the things that weren't adding up to you.
Well, the idea that somehow what was being called economic prosperity was going to equate to individual freedom, that there was some important connection. Because around me, what I was seeing was more and more people who were turning into androids, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with very small spaces of operation, so to speak. People were fitting in and fitting in. Actually, you know, we could go back even further, because I remember a key conversation I had with a dean at UCLA. This was around somewhere in the early 80s, I think. We were talking about the Vietnam War, and he said, look, all those protests against the war, everything that happened on the UCLA campus, which was fairly significant during the war, he said, the very moment that the military draft was ended, it was like nothing ever happened.
It's true.
Nothing ever happened. I said, so describe that a little bit more. He said, well, from that moment on, the students on campus began to suddenly think about the job market. Where do I fit in? What's my niche in the job market? How can I prepare myself for the kind of salary that I want, get the job that I want, so forth and so on? And he said that was it. Everything else, all the ideals, everything that had gone, the energy, the whole 9 yards that had to do with Vietnam, vanished overnight. And I said, well, that's pretty incredible. He said, yeah. He said, if you were sitting in my office at the time, you would have been paralyzed. You would have thought you were, transported to a different planet. That's how quick things can change. And it speaks to this idea of humans turning into androids, turning into programmed, mechanical objects almost. Okay, so now what do I have to do? And where do I fit in? And what do I have to think? And what should I say? And what shouldn't I say? All these things become paramount.
Gosh, it reminds me of all of those rah-rah seminars and things that I got sent to when I worked for a few corporations, that got you all into all that stuff to make you work more, be more efficient, get more work done. Yeah. We were all chasing the gold ring, and talking about our 401k plans.
That's right.
Feeding
and nowhere was it happening with more force than on Wall Street.
Yeah.
Because those guys really had, the inside track.
I don't think it ever occurred to any of us when all that stuff was going on, what a tsunami of money was being sent to Wall Street in the form of mutual fund contributions from employees and employers that it must have been the most incredible cash cow system that Wall Street had ever experienced. But I didn't notice it until it was over. And during the time, I never heard anybody talk about it. We were all just caught up in the current.
That's right. That's the way it went. That is the way it went. And as I keep writing and discussing, so forth. When a person loses the concept of what their own freedom is and what it's for, then what else do you have? You just have, what's my role in the stage play called reality? Where do I fit in? How can I play a part well enough so that I can get ahead and I can be accepted, et cetera, and not become somebody who stands out. All of these kinds of things, which, of course, I've been building for a long time.
Right. Certainly has. John, we have our music playing, so we're going to roll into our third and final segment. On the other side, let's take a quick zip through your 3 programs. For our listeners, if you're near your computer, go to nomorefakenews.com. On the right-hand side, there are 3 large, bright-colored graphics, which will, if you click on each one of them, those are clickable links, and you go to the pages with outlines for the 3 programs: Matrix Revealed, Exit from the Matrix, and Power Outside the Matrix. And on the other side, John, let's do a quick zip through the 3 programs, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Far Out Radio. John Rappaport's with us this evening. As we roll into our last segment with John, we're going to go over a really cool program that he has on his website, nomorefakenews.com. If you go to the home page, on the right-hand side, there are 3 very big, bright-colored graphics for the 3 programs. So, John, let's take a quick tour through these. The first one is titled The Matrix Revealed, and when I went reading through the material, you had something on here. You said I didn't stop investigating and publishing, but my field of operation widened. My first big question was, who really runs the world? That is something that I remember asking myself as a teenager, but it took me about 30 years to start to dig into it. Give us a quick overview of what a reader gets or what a customer gets when they purchase Matrix Revealed.
Well, I met an insider. Complicated story, but not enough time to go into it here. Used the pseudonym of Ellis Metaboy, who was, in fact, a retired propaganda operative, very high up in terms of the kinds of elites that he worked for. And after several conversations, he said to me, if you really want to understand how reality is built, the nuts and the bolts of it, he said, I don't mean just the generalities, but, how it's really done, planet-wide. He said, I could tell you because he said that's what my job was, day in and day out, on very high-level operations. And that began a series of off-the-record interviews, some of which I began publishing in a weekly newsletter. So one major component of this collection called The Matrix Revealed is several dozen interviews with Ellis Metaboy, where he really spells it out in terms of what is really a psychological operation, what psychology is being contacted in human beings, in their mind, and how does the manipulation really work. very profound learning experience for me, which I decided to pass on in terms of many of these interviews. And then the second key was my work in the late 80s, early 90s with a clinical hypnotherapist named Jack True, who became a colleague and friend and a collaborator in terms of many techniques and exercises that we developed together. Again, I think it's 42 interviews with Jack in text form in The Matrix Revealed on what he discovered about mind control, freedom, power of the individual, exactly how programming connects with the deepest levels of the subconscious and liberation from all of that. There are many other interviews as well with other people, and there is also an audio presentation extensively on the planetary chessboard, as I call it. The purpose of this first collection was to reveal really deeper truths about what I metaphorically call the reality manufacturing company. How reality is built for the entire population of the planet, the nuts and the bolts of it, how it really works, and clues about liberating oneself from it. So when I finished the first collection, I realized, okay, this is more than just, well, I'll listen to these, I'll read this, and so forth, for somebody who has a collection. This is something really to be studied and used and worked on and gone over many times, just like you would if you were in a PhD program or something at a real university, wherever that might be, I don't know. And so when I followed that with the two next collections, Exit from the Matrix and Power Outside the Matrix, I followed that same idea. I want to present information that a person can access and use, really use, and study really, without limit, many times. Not just a brush off, or here we go, let's see what this is, but to really apply oneself in a very serious way. That's why I made them so extensive in terms of the amount of material in each one. Exit from the Matrix is all about the power of imagination, the power of the individual to invent and create reality as opposed to accepting what the Matrix gives him. And that is based primarily on my work with Jack True and also on a great deal of research into ancient Tibet before the theocracy took over that country. Mm-hmm. So we're going back about 1,400 years when there were students and teachers in Tibet who were very much involved at a very intense level with the power of imagination, of exercises and techniques for the imagination that would eventually give a person access, not just in an intellectual way, but in a very deep inner way to the notion that he can indeed create reality, new reality, extensive reality, without limit, potentially without limit, which is something that most spiritual traditions on planet Earth have abandoned as a goal or as an idea in favor of, wherever power is, it's coming from somewhere else, it's not yours, and so on and so forth. And then finally, with Power Outside the Matrix, the idea was, okay, how does one become stably able to operate outside of reality that has been created for everybody? How is one able to operate with power outside and also re-enter, exit, because that's the whole idea. We're here. This is real. This is a planet. We're living on it. It is, where we are right now. So the ideal situation is that one is able to operate right here with power be here in this moment, but also be able to exit consensus reality on many levels and operate outside it as well. So that was the goal, and that's what the material in that final series called Power Outside the Matrix is all about. And it mirrors my work as a reporter in the sense that when you look at it from that perspective, what I've been doing all along, really since 1982 when I started this, is to expose false realities that have been put there to convince the population that this is the way things are. This is the matrix. This is where you are. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. This is how much power you have. This is where you don't have any power. All of that sort of thing. Whether it's medical or financial or military or intelligence, covert ops, etc., etc. My work as a reporter has basically been about exposing those false realities and showing exactly how they are false and how many, many people are accepting these delusions as reality. So to follow up from my work as a reporter, the next step would be these three collections because, as you said at the top of the show, I'm not content to just say, well, you know, here's how bad things really are and there's nothing we can do about it. I've never had that point of view and I never will. To me, I look at the long, long, long term and I see that the individual has such tremendous potential that somewhere up the line there are tremendous opportunities for not only what you could call a personal revolution in consciousness, but a revolution that will ultimately embrace the whole planet.
Well, John, each one of your programs is just packed to the gills with information. I mean, my gosh, you got 10 and a half hours of audio. For folks that just like to listen to things, it's like 10 and a half hours of audio in the first program. The third program has 55 hours of audio. Geesh. You know, John, this business about imagination, I forget who I heard make the distinction that the people that run this planet are using the same techniques, only they're using it for their own devices, and it's only for them. But the very same techniques and process will work for anyone if you just put your mind to it instead of watching the boob tube.
It's absolutely true. It can be turned around completely.
And that's what the whole purpose of the boob tube is for.
Yes, exactly. You know, I call them perverse artists. You know, they are painting this gigantic mural and saying to everybody, look, this is reality. Here it is.
It's all quite amazing when you pull back and look at it. And for our listeners, if this might be a little bit too much, all I would suggest is stop watching the TV for a month or so and then go back to it, and you'll be shocked at what you see. It is unbelievably crass and whizzy. So, John, we're all out of time, buddy. Thanks for being with us tonight. I always enjoy talking with you.
Me too. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. We'll do it again soon.
Absolutely.
That is our program for this evening. Thanks for being with us this Friday night. Our pal Robert Morningstar will be with us. It's always a far-out time when Robert is here. I know he's working on some new UFO things, but in between now and Friday, he could be on to something else. You never know with Robert. That's what always makes him fun. Have a great week. Be back on Friday with more Far Out Radio.